The first week of May 2026 has proven to be a historic turning point. From the strategic waters of the Persian Gulf, all the way to the tech hubs in Bengaluru, and right up to the front lines of Eastern Europe, we are literally watching the old world order dismantle right in front of us.
Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to dive into today's briefing with you guys. Because, listen, if you really want to understand the modern world, we can't just look at these global events in a vacuum. It's like a giant puzzle. Today, we're going to connect the dots across global defense, economics, energy, and cutting-edge tech. We really need to unpack how the global order is shifting under the massive weight of these new alliances. So let's explore this together.
Here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We're breaking this down into 4 interconnected pillars. First, the geopolitical chessboard. Second, the global economic pulse. Third, energy war and independence. And fourth, the innovation frontier. Let's get right into it.
Pillar number 1, the geopolitical chessboard, looking at flashpoints and fractures.
We're seeing military escalations across multiple continents right now, and they're acting kind of like falling dominoes. Let's trace the timeline for just early May. On May 2nd, the whole narrative of the war in Eastern Europe shifted, dramatically. During the Russian May push toward Kupiansk, Ukraine rolled out its very first domestically produced Polyanitia long-range drone swarms. These autonomous units completely bypassed defenses and struck 3 major Russian ammunition depots deep inside Belgorod and Voronezh. And crazy enough, on that exact same day, a collision between Chinese and Philippine vessels near the Second Thomas Shoal pushed Manila to actually invoke the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, which immediately drew a U.S. Navy carrier strike group deployment. Fast forward just 48 hours to May 4th, a coordinated Ukrainian strike using upgraded ATACMS disabled the remaining spans of the Kerch Bridge, basically severing Russia's main ground communication lines straight into Crimea.
But, this tension isn't just isolated to Europe. The Middle East is reaching a true 3-year fever pitch. An Israeli strike on IRGC advisors in Beirut triggered this massive rocket barrage from Hezbollah toward Haifa. That led Israel to mobilize 2 reserve divisions right to the northern border. Further south, things are shifting too. A newly formed temporary international security force, which is actually led by the UAE, Jordan, and Egypt, began these unprecedented ground patrols in northern Gaza amid some sporadic clashes. Meanwhile, swinging back over to Asia, Beijing just wrapped up its Joint Sword 2026B exercises. And for the very first time, they used civilian ferries to simulate a full-on blockade and amphibious landing on Taiwan.
Okay, let this staggering figure sink in for a second. Plus 14%. Global defense spending has jumped 14% year over year. To put that into perspective, that is the single largest increase we have seen since the Cold War. Just think about what that actually means for global supply chains and national budgets. The world isn't just preparing for a potential conflict anymore, it's actively rearming for a completely new era of multi-theater volatility.
Moving on to Pillar 2, the global economic pulse and how central banks are holding the line.
So how exactly do central banks hold the line when the geopolitical map is literally on fire? Well, we have 2 completely different realities playing out right now. On one hand, you've got the United States Federal Reserve holding an incredibly rigid hawkish stance. They've stubbornly kept rates steady at 5.25 to 5.5%, mostly because of that sticky service sector inflation. And this rigid posture has driven the US dollar index up to a formidable 105.80. But then you look over at India, and they are navigating this really complex dual reality. Their domestic economic engine is absolutely roaring. They just reported a record-breaking GST collection of 2.15 trillion rupees. That gives the government some massive fiscal breathing room. However, that higher-for-longer global interest rate environment, it's taking a serious toll. The sheer gravity of that strong US dollar pushed the Indian rupee down to 84.15, which actually forced the Reserve Bank of India to step in heavily just to pull it back. The big takeaway here? Domestic growth is fantastic, but absolutely no one is immune to the gravity of the US dollar.
That brings us to Pillar 3, energy war and independence, and what looks like the end of OPEC.
All these geopolitical and economic pressures, they are sending massive shockwaves right through the energy market. I want to walk you through the intense chronological whiplash the oil markets experienced in literally just 1 week. So step 1. On April 29th, Brent crude was surging dangerously close to $120 a barrel, and that was driven by a U.S. blockade on Iranian shipping. But then step 2, May 1st. This is a date that is absolutely going down in the history books. The United Arab Emirates formally exited OPEC. They just walked away. They chose to abandon those production quotas entirely to focus on their own aggressive national growth strategy. And then step 3, by May 6th, the market went through this massive correction. Brent plunged 7% to settle near $102, all because of reports dropping about an imminent one-page peace deal between the US and Iran that could potentially reopen the Strait of Hormuz. What a roller coaster, right?
Now, think about the immediate aftermath of that UAE exit. $55 billion. Right after leaving the cartel, ADNOC announced this absolutely staggering $55 billion capital investment program. This is a historic shift, guys. They are prioritizing sovereign national growth over cartel limitations. Think about it. When a major player steps away from collective price controls just to invest this heavily in their own infrastructure, it sends a crystal clear signal. It says they fundamentally believe the future of energy belongs to independent producers, not unified cartels.
But it's not just the Middle East shifting their strategy. There's a prevailing sentiment right now summarizing the Western response, which is all about, quote, decoupling from the volatility of the Middle East by making Canadian and American gas the new global premium. See, the physical damage to Qatari LNG assets means we're going to see a supply lag persisting for a while. Because of that, the West is executing a massive strategic pivot. Shell's recent $22 billion acquisition of ARC Resources completely cements this new reality. They're doubling down hard on North American LNG. Energy independence isn't just some political talking point anymore. It is a strict structural requirement. And that shift, that is going to dictate global markets for the next decade for sure.
Finally, Pillar 4, the innovation frontier and the massive AI supercycle. While the physical map and global energy grids are being totally redrawn, our technological leaps are accelerating at an absolute breakneck pace. The data from April 2026 alone is mind-blowing. Global venture capital funding hit $56 billion. But here's the crazy part, how that money is actually distributed. A whopping 66% of that capital went straight into artificial intelligence. 2/3. We are seeing an unprecedented density of capital flowing directly into one single sector, basically starving out nearly everything else. Make no mistake, this isn't just a passing trend, it is a fundamental reallocation of the entire world's innovation budget.
But here's the thing, that money isn't just going into chatbots anymore. Actually, scratch that, it's way bigger. We need to clearly define a critical evolution that's happening right now, physical AI. This is the big shift from just software applications to actually integrating AI directly into hardware. We're talking about massive funding rounds closing for things like green steel manufacturing, modular EV trucks, and even humanoid robotics. Just this week, Anthropic and Jeff Bezos' Project Prometheus raised a combined staggering $25 billion, and that was specifically focused on AI manufacturing and clinical diagnostics, real physical world stuff. To support this massive leap into hardware, global tech ecosystems are having to mature really rapidly. India is a prime example of this. Under their new deep tech policy, India has actually extended startup recognition to a massive 20 years. That's absolutely crucial to support the really long gestation periods required for complex biotech and space tech. Alongside that, their semiconductor vision just hit a major milestone. Big Indian Semiconductors successfully raised funds to commercialize India's very first homegrown system on chip. So the brain of the chip and the soul of the factory are finally coming together to support this whole new hardware era. However, we really have to ground all this AI data in human reality. 11%. Freshworks announced an 11% workforce reduction this week. But here is the truly jarring part. Their revenue is actually growing. This reduction wasn't because of poor performance. The company explicitly stated it was due to AI efficiency. As autonomous agents start to actually execute enterprise workflows instead of just, suggesting them, the very nature of the SaaS workforce is being rewritten in real time. It's a pretty sobering reminder of the human cost of this transition, but it's also hard proof that this AI supercycle is already fundamentally changing how businesses operate from the ground up.
So, when we connect all these dots, the pattern of May 2026 becomes abundantly clear. The old structures, whether we're talking about the Kerch Bridge, the OPEC cartel, or traditional software workflows, they're all being dismantled. The world is pricing in a totally new reality. High interest rates, multi-theater defense spending, and autonomous AI integration, they aren't just temporary shocks anymore. They are the new foundation. So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. How will you adapt to a new global foundation built on high interest rates, historic defense spending, and autonomous AI? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.